some of the problems with building a system internally can be defining your requirements at the front end, grabbing all of the different stakeholders within an organization and getting them to contribute to those requirements is challenge number one. Finance is involved, operations, IT, customer service, your web teams, and of course IT are all involved in this requirements gathering process because they've all got a unique perspective on what a subscription system should do for them. Then you've got your third-party vendors that you might be working with. So every merchant's going to have an acquirer that they work with that processes their payments, but you might also be talking about an external CRM, an SAP, a Salesforce, or something like that. You might be looking at your email vendors who send communications to your customers, and your tax vendor who calculates taxes for you if you operate in multiple domains or countries even. So you have to take all of these things into account when you're starting to talk about how do I build out this system. Then once you've even captured all of these requirements, it's the cost and time associated with it. These systems aren't built overnight. In a prior life at a merchant I worked at in a very high volume environment, we operated about 6 different billing systems. And at one point went down the path of trying to consolidate them all into one. That project really took 3 years to just get off the ground, or I should say launch, and then we were continually enhancing it. And that cost was tens of millions of dollars to build out that system for the requirements of that business. Now, multi-billion-dollar business, so a very complicated environment, but nonetheless, several years into it, tens of millions of dollars into it, and then we continued to invest after that. And it was both to keep up with our own internal business as well as what was happening around us. So new rules, new requirements, and just wanting to take advantage of new features and other third parties that were out there in the marketplace. So these were all things that we had to consider when talking about building out a new system from scratch. So similarly to what you would look at when you're building out a system, you'd go through a very similar process when you would be buying it. You still need to understand your requirements, who you are as a business, still need to bring those stakeholders to the table and document out those requirements. But really what that ends up turning into, instead of a business requirements document to build it, is usually an RFP document. Even if it's not a formal RFP, you want to be able to hand these potential suppliers a list of requirements for your business so that you can get apples to apples responses back and know what you're potentially buying. But what we've seen time and time again when going down this path is that merchants don't always uncover all of their unique requirements. And so they may select a vendor not really understanding even their own business and what their own requirements are today, let alone what's for the future, right? So in talking with these suppliers, they get to a point of selecting one and then start down the deployment or implementation process. And inevitably, with a merchant of any size and complexity, new requirements start to come out through that process. And then the two parties come to the table and talk about how are we going to solve for these things. A lot of them can be solved and aren't a big deal, but you do run into some that become roadblocks that have to be solved for. So either the business has to change the way they do things, which they oftentimes don't want to do, or it doesn't even make sense for them to do, or the vendor now has to figure out how to solve for this new unique requirement. We have built middleware in certain situations to help solve for those types of unique requirements, but they need to be solved for one way or another. So that's just what you find through the deployment process, let alone when you're now live and running and then you want to launch a new product. You want to change your business rules, or there's a new regulation or new payment method or some new feature that you want to take advantage of out there. Who does that, right? Is it your supplier that needs to do that on your behalf? Or is this something that now you're back to the drawing board of having to figure out how to do? So selecting the right partner there is critically important. Are they going to be able to grow and scale with you? Are they going to be flexible for the future? Are they continuing to invest in their product? These are all things that are really, really important when you're talking about buying a subscription platform.